I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. Leadership gets messy when blind spots and triggers run the show. In this episode, executive coach and TEDx speaker Ingrid Hu Dahl reveals how to break that cycle. You'll learn how to lead without ego, how to create psychological safety with virtual teams, and how to build reliability instead of old school accountability. Ingrid shares raw personal stories, fresh insights, and practical tools you can use today to strengthen your connection, deepen trust, and show up more boldly as a leader. So if you're ready to level up your impact, this episode is in your next move. Ingrid, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dean.
I know
Thanks
you're a
for having me.
coach. You bet. I know you're a TEDx colleague, being that we're part of the same club. And I know that you've written a book. But let's start with something personal. What got you into coaching? Usually there's something that sparked the need or the desire or the passion. And I think that everyone's got a different story about gets them into this business. Why this? Why coaching? Why working with leaders and teams? What is it that brought you into this line of work?
Being coached. I was a senior leader at Capital One and had this great opportunity to have a year's worth of weekly coaching through BetterUp. My master coach and I are still close and still friends to this day. That person helped me realize so many blind spots and limitations to what I thought was some pretty kick-ass leadership skills. I was an all right leader, but man, I became a much deeper, more curious, authentic driven, vulnerability opened person as a result. And it was so inspired by how just through his thoughtful listening and questions evoked so much awareness. I was like, oh my God, I, I got to learn how to be a coach because I'm in learning and development. I'm a manager, leader, facilitator, mentor. Something about this world is untapped. And it was true. I went and studied coaching and was like, wow, I'm not listening at levels 2 or 3. I'm not listening to understand. I'm just listening to respond. And it really was hard and humbling for me to come up with exploratory driven questions to start with what. I was so used to saying, tell me, or even why, or how, but not what. So, man, humbling and expansive.
You mentioned blind spots. There's a lot that we could talk about that. There's a great book, Jim Collins, that talks about blind spots with very successful businesses and how the mighty fall. And of course, a lot of those examples, those businesses are no longer around because of blind spots. Do you see any common blind spots that keep showing up with leaders and teams? And if so, what are they?
One is ego.
What is the blind spot for ego, though?
Yeah, it's when managing your ego becomes more important than the actual goal of what you're trying to drive, your vision, connecting with the team, cultivating a trusting environment. All those things require a clear pathway of this is the purpose, this is the goal, this is the priority. But when managing your ego becomes a priority, all of that goes out the door. And that's what I mean. So an example is I want to be perceived as a warrior and a strong ass leader. And I really don't want to be perceived as weak or a martyr. I'm like triggered by anyone who might perceive me as a martyr. And if all I'm doing all day is to try to make sure that people see me as a warrior and strong and do not see this other kind of thing that I don't want you to see, what am I doing all day? I'm just managing that, not truly wanting to connect with people and letting that go aside. It doesn't matter how I'm perceived in all instances. What matters is how I show up and how I make people feel.
Oh boy, there's so many things we could unpack here. This is good. Do you feel that leaders spend most of their time or just a little bit of their time managing their own triggers and managing the triggers of other people? Like how much,
Oh,
I mean, I see this happens all the time. It's like, where's the work? Where is the business? Where is the KPIs, the SOPs, the vision, the mission? It seems like leaders are spending a lot of time managing their own triggers and the triggers of other people. If you agree to that, which your head is going up and down, then how do we, as coaches and or non-coaches, help those people who are being triggered a lot?
yeah. I think it's really interesting. We're talking about emotional intelligence, right? So the sort of
Yeah.
self awareness, social awareness, relationship management. And people are still confusing, like, oh, I just got to control my emotions. And you're like, no, you can't, what? No, we can choose how we react and how we respond. But in order to be able to thoughtful about those choices, we actually really have to understand those feelings, the perception, the beliefs, the triggers that then correspond with how we behave. And behavior is very important. We're not here to solve everybody's stuff. Like everybody has stuff, right? Limiting beliefs. They come with all kinds of complexities. And as a manager, it's hard to kind of take that like kaleidoscope and make sense of every single plane. But your opportunity is to create an environment where people can be like, oh, wow, yeah, I am aware that that's a pattern. I'm curious about where that's coming from. And if I were to expand my lens from a different perspective, which a coach can do, or have a growth mindset around this, what would that look like? If I wasn't
Mm,
caught up on this mixtape of people misunderstand me, which I've often gotten caught up in, I'm different. I'm going to choose to be an outsider. Every time I think like that, my behavior actually looks like being withdrawn, not caring, and that's not true.
mm.
So how can I shift that? We have the power and the levers to do so. When we look at KPIs, kind of to your point, like, okay, well, these are really important, like business priorities, like having really strong, high performing teams, being lean and nimble and getting shit done. People I find when they feel like you've done the work, you've built the relationships and the trust are they focus on reliability. Not accountability, but reliability. They hear the real talk. They can question if this is the right priority. That gets to high performance and nailing those KPIs because you have that alignment. But I find, because I know you want to ask me about, teams that are hybrid. Part of what I've done is build highly empathetic leadership skills, applying that to small teams, and through that process, creating space that honors them, sees them, values them. That reliability has gotten us through so many wins, and it's a shared reliability. I'll pause
So I
there.
love it. You're got me thinking about what's your definition or the difference between accountability and reliability?
I think accountability kind of feels a little bit punitive. Like if I don't
Mm,
do this, then I haven't shown up as the adult that I am to be accountable. It kind of just feels a little infantilizing the adult in
mm,
some ways.
mm,
Yes, accountability is important as a word, as like a yes, but reliability is a choice. I get to participate into the
mm.
degree of reliability that I show up. There's a reciprocity that comes with being reliable and having a culture of reliability. Um, that reciprocity is a big value of mine, but people can't be reciprocal if they don't understand what that looks like. So, getting to know people and to share, gosh, this is what this looks like for me. What does it look like for you? That gets us a lot more clear around how I can show up for these direct reports, my peers and stakeholders, and how they can show up for me.
Going back to your work at Capital One, big company,
Hmm.
and we've been talking about triggers and reliability versus accountability. Um, it seems to me that the environment for getting triggered or hiding out without being accountable or reliable is somewhat being encouraged by this space called virtual meetings and the interactions
Mm,
in which we are having. It's like I can go into a meeting now and not even have my camera on. And I
mhm.
cannot believe how many businesses allow that to happen. So there is this disconnect that we already have by the fact that even you and I are not sitting in the same room together. We're talking over this platform called, Riverside. Um, how do we build psychological safety? How do we get deep, real, human centric connection with people when we have an environment that seems to get in the way of that? Knowing that deep, connected, trusting, accountable, reliable, psychologically safe people produce better results.
Oh man, sometimes I think if we slip into the mundane, we will. It's kind of like, let me go into a completely different environment of riding a horse. If you're riding a horse around a ring, eventually what the horse might want to do is kind of create this rut. So there's a
Mm,
rut around the ring and it'll just follow the rut. And then it's really hard to get this amazing horse out of the rut. People are no different. When something feels mundane, like, oh, here comes Monday's meeting. I want, I'm not going to be participating on video. I'm going to do like, I'm going to half pay attention and half like make my breakfast and get, my coffee going,
or
whatever.
do my shopping at Costco.
Sure. I mean, life, right? We're trying to
Yeah.
balance all the things, but the mundane allows the opportunity to disengage. So I find that as a leader, it's really
Hmm.
important to figure out, okay, we do need these touch points. They don't always need to be on Mondays. They don't need to be for a full hour. What is actually the thing that's going to make this team engage by choice? Not because I've required them to be, but because it's like, oh, it's your opportunity to bring in a problem that we can all flex and try to ideate and solve for you and with you. Like it has to have a different kind of purpose, and it's not just my voice. It's everybody has an opportunity to lead. We
Hmm.
can get a lot more creative about these spaces. And I find when I'm like, hey, I'm going to fly out to New York, I'm going to physically be there. For those of you who are physically based in New York, I'd love to see you because what happens is half the time you fly out and people who are local don't don't show up locally. They'll show up on Zoom and you're like, "No, that's not
Yeah.
cool." So
Yeah.
but sharing very clearly and like as an ask, like, hey, I'm making this effort. Got to fly 7 hours to get there. Could you do your hour commute and be there with me?
Hmm.
And then I'm going to be bringing my team and they're coming on Zoom and they're excited and engaged and they're all going to be on video because this is the purpose of our time. So being really clear about the purpose, the outcome, and the energy and being creative about it, I find makes these spaces really dynamic and being really thoughtful about the voices that you hear. So if you close your eyes and you're listening to the voices in the room, if you only hear your voice, there's
Hmm.
very good likelihood that some people are going to come off camera. They're just listening. They're not fully engaging. And you want their engagement. You need their engagement and their input. And the last thing I'd say is most of us leaders hopefully have hired people who are smarter than us, who know their craft better than us. And so we need them more, right? We're orchestrating an environment that experts are coming and leaning in and showing up brightly. So let's make sure that we're conducting that experience like that.
I just was writing as you were talking this idea that what the conditions that made no, so let me restate this. The conditions that make a poor or bad Zoom meeting were already present when we had face-to-face meetings.
Mhm.
In that I think what you're trying to say, and I'm just rephrasing it in my own way, is to say that we need to structure these engagements, calling them meetings, in such a way that they're not just reporting in on this department's whatever results, which is really just a reporting in meeting, that we have some things to chew on. We have some discussions to be had. We are structuring it for engagement versus reporting in. And that's a completely different environment, whereby I do think we've always sort of done meetings that way, like, let's just report in, how's it
Yeah.
going? It's not very structured. It's Monday morning, it's 8 o'clock. It's the same thing we always do. It's the rut, I'm the horse, I'm still in the groove. All of that makes sense. But we got to get better and more intentional about meetings. And I think in some ways, the Zoom meetings have the opportunity, Zoom, WebEx, whatever, to become more intentional because it's more in our face when people disconnect. They literally don't have their cameras on. If that isn't an indication that you've lost your audience, I don't know what is.
And I think you can ask, I think it's great to be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm really curious. I noticed, you weren't on camera. Is there anything
Yeah.
going on? Are you okay? So it's like, hey, I've noticed, I'm checking in. I'm not assuming something is you don't give a crap. I'm actually curious if something is going on. I think that's really important to kind of set the tone, or being honest, hey, I'm not on camera. And the reason why I'm not on camera is blah, 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 blah. But it was important for me to show up in any way I could.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the best I
Definitely.
got for right now.
Well, I've mentioned this before in this podcast that we are in an isolation epidemic in many ways. There was a study that just came out. I think it was another TED Talk, and that the number one predictor of living a long, healthy, cognitively fruitful life was certainly things like exercise and diet, which we would understand and make sense that that would be part of it. But the very top was social connection. It was being able to connect with people. And that seems to be ubiquitous to so many other things we're hearing. Blue Zones talks about that.
Hmm.
Vivek Murthy, our current guy who's exiting, I think soon, or maybe already has, Surgeon General, talks about isolation and depression as being a real
Hmm.
serious health issue that we got to take into consideration. And I think coaches like you can help people connect, even though the way in which you're connecting and the way in which they're connecting with each other is in a Zoom environment.
Yeah. I like
Yeah.
that you said that. I was
Well,
just had a client earlier today, and it wasn't around depression. It was around high anxiety, that this
mm,
suddenly feels like you're in a public speaking environment. And if you don't have the answer right away, they're going to skip to somebody else who has the response. And then because you're not physical and can't circle back, it just feels like you're out there in the middle of the ocean. Why am I here?
yeah. So yeah, obviously that's part of it. This anxiety piece, which seemed to connect back to this lack of connection. It's shifting gears a little bit. I think that coaching has been around for a long time. It's been 30 some odd years. It's become a very popular and I think very effective tool for leaders and teams
Hmm.
for a variety of reasons, which I'm not here to sell our audience on the value of coaching so much, but needless to say, it's in our toolkit of resources that organizations have. And so you have two things. So in some ways, you could say the market is flooded. We have
Mm,
tons of coaches out there,
there's
right?
a lot.
We have an industry that doesn't regulate it, which probably it shouldn't, right? We got to have a person who's just, who gets fired from a company and says, I think I'll be a coach. They become a coach and now they're a
Mm,
coach.
mm,
May or may not be a good coach, right? So
hmm.
there's no sort of standards unless you go through, ICF and you become, master certified coach. There's standards there. I get that. But then nonetheless, one could say coaching is everywhere. And you've got two things that have helped you focus your opinion about this industry and about human development. One is your TEDx talk, and two is your book.
Mm,
I personally have struggled with discovering what my point of view is because
mm,
I kind of think like, hey, it's already been said, you know?
mm.
And I'm finally writing a book after so many years. I did do a
Oh,
TEDx talk. It was very, very helpful for me to do it. But those are
fantastic.
two different exercises that really force you to clarify what your point of view is or what's your voice. So what was your voice? What did you want to impart? What was your key idea worth spreading when you did the TEDx talk? I know it was several years ago. What was the main message that you were giving? And then I want to find out, how applicable is it today? And then I also want to know a little bit more about your book because
Sure.
you've already done the brain work. Let's figure out what it is you learned.
Okay, so 11 plus years ago with my TEDx talk, the idea worth spreading is that women might have lost tapping into their rebellious teenage spirit. So, how
Oh,
can we apply that same rebellious teenage spirit as female leaders now? We actually need to call upon that rebellion. I still think that's valuable today, frankly. And my book is a
oh,
leadership.
so before you get to the book,
Oh,
hang on a second. Let's
okay.
stick with the first one because you caught my attention. So the first thing I got to ask you is why do you feel that's the case? And I think I'm sort of channeling the listeners, like, okay, Ingrid, you caught my attention on that one. Why do you think that women have lost their teenage rebelliousness, whether it's 11 years or today?
Well, the context of the talk was how I was learning a lot of this from the Rock and Roll Camp for Girls movement. So I did my practicum at the Rock and Roll Camp for Girls in Portland, nearby
Hmm.
Oregon, and helped found a rock and roll camp for girls in Brooklyn. And there was about 50 globally. So what I was sharing was, girls who are losing their self esteem at, rocket numbers, so debilitating. This 5-day experience that amplified their voices, that brought them together in these ways and said, I encourage your rebellious, badass spirit. Now grab that mic, almost swallow it, and like rock out. And what was happening in those 5 days was incredible transformation that you could feel, that you could witness, that it was incredible. And there's still girls who've grown up who are still in touch with me and they're, amazingly sharing their journey, but they're always looking for that experience with other women like, "Oh, how do
Yeah.
I replicate that?" And so my talk was trying to remind women that just in that same way where self-esteem was plummeting with these young girls and in 5 days, you're kind of resurging the rebellious spirit and the can do among a community of women cheering you on, we could replicate that too. We can't forget. We have the tools to do it. And that rebellion is actually important because, oh my goodness, if there was any time other than now to challenge the status quo, what are we doing? We have to be able to take the risk to say, no, I disagree. Let me share this vision. Here's how we're moving towards it. It's important to
This
be rebellious and to say those things and challenge the status quo as opposed to being like, oh God, I feel nervous or insecure, or I can't do that, or I've tried that and then I got burned. No, this is the opportunity to say, like, this isn't working. Here's what we're going to do.
This is great. So we found a way back to sort of the things we were talking about before in some ways, this rebellious spirit that what I sort of started to write down in my little notes as you were talking was, oh my God, research done by a gal named Edmondson out of
Mm,
Harvard. She's the
Amy.
one that coined the phrase, Amy. Yeah, she's the one that
Yeah.
coined the
Psych
phrase
safety.
psychological safety.
Yeah.
And she's written a lot on the topic. I actually saw her about a year and a half ago. And her research is saying is that rebellious spirit, not only in women, but in men, supported by psychological safety, is actually what drives organizations towards being learning organizations versus just structured for execution. And so the irony, of course, is that when you have a learning organization, you actually execute more and you create more and you get more done. So and you really dig into her work, this rebellious spirit is exactly what she's talking about. But you can't have a rebellious person on your team unless you have psychological safety that allows that.
That's right.
Otherwise, they
And
get ostracized. We shoot them down.
totally.
We kick them out. They're off the tribe or off the team.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And it's similar to Brene Brown, right? So it's a lot
right.
around courage and bravery and vulnerability. That's part of it. Karen O, who's an incredible, like half Korean rock and roll um, badass who leads. She's the front woman of the band, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. She recently was saying like vulnerability is the most punk rock. So it's
Hmm.
like things have changed. It's like being tough and like again leading with that ego is not the way to lead. You can still be rebellious and challenge the status quo and be vulnerable and care about people and lead with empathy. Like those things are actually more united now, and they were required as the ways that we show up authentically, leading with curiosity and care and still challenging that status quo. That's what I mean. It's different now.
That's great. So that the vulnerability doesn't become a overused amount of time for your triggers, right? You can be vulnerable, but not wallow in your triggers, much like what we were talking about earlier, which is one of the things that hold us back. Vulnerability just means that you're being authentic, no matter
Yes,
where you are.
that's
And
right.
that vulnerability creates strength for being bold, for saying what needs to be done, for being able to lead if you need to lead, or knowing when to let go when you need to let go.
That's right.
I like this. This is good.
Good. Well, so
All
I
right.
know you and I both have done TEDx, and you and I also have, well, books. Your book is coming, right?
It's being birthed.
It's being birthed. It does feel like that, doesn't it?
I'm in the last trimester.
Oh my God. Good luck. You got this. You got this. Breathe,
Yeah,
breathe,
it's very
breathe.
uncomfortable. I'm not sleeping well, and I'm eating a lot of
Oh,
stuff I shouldn't be eating, but nonetheless.
lots of cravings. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
exactly.
Oh, it's amazing. Oh my goodness. Well, I do want to say that
Yeah, let's talk
writing,
about the book too.
yeah, just writing a book. And I think what you're getting at is like distilling the essence of what you want to leave a reader or a listener with. And for me, this is a leadership origin story. So it's sun shining on morning snow. That happens to be the visual depiction of my Chinese given name, Tao Shi
Hmm.
Qing. It
Hmm.
comes into my lived experience as an analogy that kind of bookends the book. But the focus of this memoir is on identity, loss, and living boldly. So, what was my origin story like growing up 13 years after interracial marriage was legalized in the United States, where only 3% of the US Census had marked marriages as interracial? I am the lovely product of that. So in 1980, not a lot of kids who are mixed Asian or mixed race. And it was a really challenging way to navigate my identity growing up in predominantly New Jersey. And the journey that I bring people on is like, get into my shoes, feel what I was feeling, like, join me in the thought process of this moment where I'm being bullied at a bus stop or, what I'm going through in these different phases of my life and what I'm observing about what's happening socially, the racial kind of family expectations that I am not fitting in. There's a whole coming out journey in my book, which I share very authentically and vulnerably. Coming out was not just a switch, it was a very painful, long journey where I was very much steeped in internalized homophobia. Not a lot of people know that that can
Hmm.
be someone's journey, so I'm sharing it. It definitely created a fissure between me and my mother, my sexuality. And then she got diagnosed with cancer, lived in Taiwan. COVID happened, and it was highly dramatized trying to
Oh, geez.
get to my parent who's dying during this time period. And
Mm.
yet, what's so beautiful is choosing truth and still showing up with love and forgiveness. It's a tremendous amount of warrior spirit in my life. And my version shows up in this way that says, despite the risk of losing my mom and my family, I have to be truthful and show up
Mm.
in this way because it's authentic. And the thing that happened, and I do hope people read and listen to the book, that decision actually helped be a ballast that transformed my family. My family evolved together because of my boldness. And I'm curious for people listening is what is one thing that has not felt like you could stand in your truth that would be choosing to live boldly? One thing that's living boldly, that's yours, that actually could set a different course for those that you love because they're inspired by you. Same for leaders too. So I think this is a really great parallel, like in the experiences we have, long days in, any kind of corporation, nonprofit, what have you. There's something around identity, a thread around loss, because everybody is experiencing loss at one point in their lives, and the opportunity and the choice to live boldly or taking on the baton of being a rebellious leader. So that's why
Mm.
I think that this is a great parallel. for people to say, what is my leadership origin story? How do I capture that and share that? Because storytelling is some of the oldest ways that we connect as a species. And I don't know if I thought that people would be interested in my story. But that's maybe one of the lies is that, oh, no one would really be interested in it. No, that's not true. Every story is interesting. Every story is worth reading and learning about and connecting with.
Wow, that's great. I'm just so glad you told me that. That was really good. The boldness of being able to authentically tell your story, I think, is something that is an example that a lot of us need to really listen to and think about. And that the storytelling piece, because I see this, you see this, I'm sure we all feel this in some ways, is that we don't feel like we have a story that's worth listening to,
Right.
and yet we do, right? I am surprised still by, primarily in my company, we've got some other people that we work with, but I deal with a lot of executives, CEOs, board chairs, ELT members,
Mhm.
and to really ask them, what is your point of view about leadership, the company, where we're heading as a country, whatever it might be? You find more often than not that they haven't really thought about it. And so,
Mm.
of course, that makes it more difficult to get promoted because what is your point of view? But I love the fact that you did your TEDx talk. I love the fact that you wrote a book. I love your message because it's really all about defining what your voice is, what your authentic voice is. We've done situations like in the facilitations, like, okay, well, write an article for this team. It's 5 years out. What made it
Mm,
successful? Or another one might be, you're
nice.
going to give a TEDx talk.
What are you going to say?
What are you going to talk about? I want a
Right.
title and I want a paragraph that defines what it's all
Nice.
about. Why is this an idea we're spreading?
Love it.
Oh, it scares the shit out of people, but it gets them to start thinking about something that they haven't thought about and bringing that authentic, bold self back into existence, I think is what you're saying as well. Is that we need to all be doing that.
I love those. One thing I think is amazing working with that same demographic is if you were to enter that meeting starting out with my fear is, and stating what the goddamn fear is, and then my hope is.
Hmm.
How would that change the conversation, the dynamic of your leadership team if you showed up that way? What is
Yeah,
that fear? State it. And what is your hope?
that's great. That's a
That
good
scares
opening.
people too.
Yeah, it does. It does. Really good. This has been fantastic. So,
Yeah.
Ingrid, tell people how they can connect with you. The book, you know, all of it.
Absolutely. Well, I have two websites. One is for the book. It's just sunshiningonmorningsnow.com. And you can find out, where to buy this pretty much on any distribution. You can listen to it. I narrated it
Great.
exclusively on Audible. And then if you just go ingridhudahl.com, you'll find out all about my leadership development consulting and executive coaching. It was such a pleasure being here with you, Dean. Gosh, I feel like we could have like another two or three
Yeah,
of these and it would be really
I
fun.
know. Well, come on up to Bend, or I'll meet you in Portland, or we'll
Okay.
do coffee or something.
I would love that. You got it.
Yeah. It's funny. Don't I mean this is serious. This has actually happened with I often offer that, right? And there was one time, this was about 2 years ago, I was doing this show, and this guy is he had this really fantastic accent. So somewhere after we had finished the show, and he had some really great insights, he had said, "So tell me, what's the accent from? You sound like you're from the UK." And he goes, "Yes, I am." And he goes, I said, "Well, where? Where do you reside?" He goes, "I live in the Cotswolds in a particular small little village." I said, "No kidding. My wife and I are going to the Cotswolds for our big, annual vacation coming up in 6 months." And he goes, "Well, you should come by. Come by for coffee. We'll meet." So I kind of thought, like, yeah, it's one of those things that, people just say they're being nice. But then I followed up with him. He really wanted to get together. So not only did we get together, we came over to his house. He made dinner for us. It was my wife's birthday. They pulled out a cake. We had a phenomenal time.
Oh my God.
And
I love it.
I know it was fantastic. And, we stayed in touch. We've kind of fallen out of staying in touch, but just connections like this, going back to the theme of this whole conversation, I think is
Hmm.
around connection. And
Yes.
so whether it's virtual over a situation like this with a podcast or anything else, to boldly connect in a sometimes virtual world seems to be what we need to be doing more of.
Well, I will be in Portland at some future date, and
Okay,
I'm going to look
great.
you up for that
All right,
coffee.
you do that.
Do the same when you're in Sausalito or in San
All right.
Francisco. Call me.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for your time. This has been great.
Thanks, Dean. It's an honor.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newland. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.